Hello everyone and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be using some very exciting products from Stampin' Up! That have a combination embossing folder with a die and a stamp set. And this type of combination where they have the embossing folder and the dies and stamp set are known as a hybrid embossing folder. So I'm going to show you how that works today. I'm going to do a double page spread and a card using Seaside Wishes. And if you hang around to the end of the video, I'm going to bring in a similar layout using the Changing Leaves set in the same format, and this is a hybrid embossing folder as well, where it has the embossing folder and the dies and a stamp set. You can get them all together as a bundle, or you can purchase things individually. And this one has just become available this month as part of the online only release. And I'll have a link to all the new things with this online release. There's some gorgeous product there, but I really loved this one. So I'm going to do exactly the same layout formula, but using this one as well. So this has an embossing folder and I've put everything in together here. I've used some magnets here. You can get it with a die to cut out these gorgeous leaves and also some standalone dies as well. But the one that I'm going to do on camera today is using Seaside Wishes. So I'll just set these aside. I absolutely love that we have this sort of product available to use now. It's very exciting and it's a lot of fun to do. I've got some inks here because I'm going to do some stamping and I'm going to be treating the die cut pieces as well. So with the Stampin' Up! Embossing folders, when you emboss, you usually run it through with the Stampin' Up! Symbol at the top and you put it through your machine with the folded edge going through first. So that's quite important. You don't want to put it through this way. You need to put the folded edge through first. And the way that the dies work, this is a rather large die here, but it fits exactly into this embossed piece here. If I turn it over, you'll be able to see that a little bit better. So what it's going to do is cut out these sand dollar images while it's embossing. I've cut a piece of 4x6. You could cut it a little bit larger than this if you wanted to, if you're going to use the whole panel. But I just want to make sure that I get those sand dollars and I want some of the texture here that's going to be left behind as well. I'm going to show you how I use this on the layout. So that's all set like this. I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine and show you what the end result is. I've actually purchased the Stampin' Up! Die cutting machine, but if you have a CTMH die cutting machine, you need to put your settings to 3D and also put it all the way down to low for the pressure, and you will get a very similar result as what you get with the Stampin' Up! Machine. So let me run this through. And what you get here are these pieces cut out for you. They've just easily come away. I'm trying to put it back in the same place. There we go. So it will run through and you get 3 of these sand dollars perfectly cut out for you. I'm going to give up trying to put them in place because you'll get the idea. And then you have this textured bit as well. Now you can run this through your embossing machine without the die and you'll get the whole panel as a background feature that you could use on a card or a scrapbook layout. But I wanted to use the dies so I can put these as embellishments on the scrapbook layout that I'm going to put together with you. So now I'm going to show you the treatment I'm going to put to these. I'm also going to do some stamping with the starfish as well. There's 2 sizes of starfish. I'm just going to put all this aside so I can move my all-purpose mat over. I do love using the Stampin' Up! Glass mat and I've been using that a lot and I stamp on this and I do my ink blending on this as well. But there's quite a bit of reflection happening with my lights. So rather than having the glare, I'm just going to go back to using my all-purpose mat. But I use this pretty much all the time now because, as I've said before, my all-purpose mat has a little hole in it. So it's not the best when it comes to doing all the ink blending. So I'm just going to move this along so that I can show you what I'm going to do with the ink blending to give these a bit of texture. Now you can decide if you want to have the embossed elements of these little details here from the sand dollar up, or if you want to have them so that you have the debossed look on here and the embossed look with the rest of the sand dollar. It's totally personal preference, so you can use whichever side you like. I'm going to bring in some brushes. This is a Stampin' Up! One. These ones I've had for years. If you've been watching me for a while, you know that I got these before Close to My Heart had brought out blending brushes, and I do love the coloured handles. I'm going to use Crumb Cake and also Basic Beige. And so I don't get mixed up with my colours, I'm going to put my blending brushes right next to them. I might have to bring them up over like this so that I can keep them in camera. So this one is going to be crumb cake. So I'm going to use the crumb cake first, and I'm just going to bring it in very gently. I want a little bit of colour on these, but I don't want to oversaturate it. These ones here I did earlier, and I've got a lot of colour on there, so you can get a totally different look with how much ink you apply. But I do want for this layout a little bit of white to come through. So I've got that one inked up. I'm going to bring in my basic beige, and you can see that's got a little bit of a green tone just from the bristles here, but I just want a little bit of it just to give a bit of light and shade to these. I'm just going to go a little bit over that basic beige there, just to blend that out a little bit. I'm not going to do all three on camera for you, but I wanted to give you an idea of how I have brought in some colour. And you can see with all the embossing pieces on there, I've got some light and shade, and some of those elements have got more ink on there, and it just creates a lovely textured look. So I'm going to go ahead and ink up quite a few of these off camera. You can see how quickly the ink came together on this one. So I just need to clean up my all-purpose mat. Oh, I'm going to leave this one open because I'm going to use that again on the coral piece. So you can use your stamp chamois, you can use a wet one, you can spritz this with water and clean it off, and you can do exactly the same thing when you're using your glass mat. And I'm just going to dry that off a little bit. I know I'm going to use crumb cake again, but I want to start with this Coastal Cabana first. And these are the coral pieces that I've cut out with the dies. So there are two in there that you can cut out. And using a little bristle brush like this really helps get all these little pieces out from the die. And I usually just hold the die up in the air. I found was the easiest way to do it, and just run it around like this. You can see one just popped out here that I've missed before, and you can clean that out pretty quickly and easily with one of these. So as I said, two different sizes here, and there's not a stamp image that coordinates with this because the detail is so beautiful you don't need to stamp on it. I do want to add a little bit of Coastal Cabana, and the reason why I've chosen this colour is determined by this Country Woods paper that I'm going to use, and I'm only going to use one sheet of pattern paper to create my double page spread, and I'm going to have a little bit left over at the end of it as well. But the Coastal Cabana works really well with this, as does the crumb cake. And I'm just going to pick up a little bit of Coastal Cabana. I don't need a lot. I can tap off and get less. But I'm just bringing in a little bit of the blues, and I'll just bring in the paper again. You can see how well that works together. So I'm just inking this up a little bit, and I could just leave it like this with the blue and the white there, but I do want to bring in some of the crumb cake just to tone it down just a little bit. So I'm just going to pick up some more ink from here and bring that in so that it will all tie in really well with the inking on my sand dollars and also the stamping that I'm going to do for my starfish. So I keep picking it up like that. Sometimes it's good to have a look at it on a piece of white so you can really see the colour, because when you're inking up browns on an all-purpose mat or something like that, it does tend to blend in with the background. Have a little bit of white put aside so you can see how much ink you've got on there, and I'm happy with the amount on that one. And then I'm going to go ahead and do some more of these coral pieces. And I want to do some stamping of some starfish here. So I'm just going to wipe this down to get rid of that little bit of ink that's on there before I do my stamping. But I am going to be using this blending brush again to add some more texture to these pieces. These stamp up absolutely beautifully, and as I said before, I have been using the glass mat to stamp on, which is a little bit different from what I used to do with stamping on the spongy side of my Versamat all the time. So my starfish, I am letting the ink sink into the paper, and you can see there's lots of lovely texture on this. And to create even more texture on the small starfish here, I'm going to bring in this piece here, which because I've cut the die cut pieces out of here, I might not use. It might be waste, but I thought it would be really good to stamp some of these little starfish onto this textured background. You can see it's giving it a lot of texture here. And I just love how this looks on the starfish. I will be stamping more of all of these for the layout. You don't need to see me stamp all of that. I just can't tell you how much I love the texture on this piece here. If you had an alphabet stamp set, you could stamp your alphabet on this to create a title for this layout. I'm doing something a little bit different, but the texture would come through with this with an alphabet stamp as well. You would have to run it through quite a few times depending on how long your title was, but I think this is a really cool technique. I'm just going to bring in the two of these now that I've die cut them all. And because I have the white outline with this, with the die cuts, I'm just going to bring in a little bit more of this crumb cake just to give a little bit more texture. Now, I'm not pressing hard on my blending brush at all. I don't want too much ink on here because it'll take away from the gorgeous texture of the stamp. So I'm basically just bringing in a little bit just to soften that white edge. Just going to bring this piece of white in so that you can see it's not terribly much ink going on there, and I am tapping off before I do it, but I do want to do this to these tiny little starfish pieces as well. How cool does the texture look on this small starfish here now that it's been die cut out from that embossed panel and the little bits of inking on there? It really does look spectacular in real life. I'm hoping that the camera is picking up on that effect. So I'm going to pack all of this away. I've got all my die cut pieces, and then I'm going to start constructing the page. I wanted to show you the stamping and how the die cut and embossing hybrid embossing folder work. So I've got everything prepped so I can just go ahead and put everything together with the layout. As I said earlier, I'm going to create a double page spread from one piece of pattern paper. So what I've done is gone around and I've gutted out the inside piece of this just an inch in from all the edges. And then I have a 10 by 10 piece left, and I have just simply cut that in half. So I've got two 5 by 10 inch pieces, and I'm going to have a white base on the right side, and I've got an 11 by 11 inch piece here that I'm just going to put over top of here. And you can see I have done some inking on the edges. So I'm going to show you how I did that, because I'm going to do the same thing for the right side, because I wanted to bring in some of this texture that's in this pattern paper onto the white pieces. So I'm just bringing in crumb cake again. And this is my favorite technique for inking up paper and giving it a distressed edge. Now, when you purchase the glass mat, you also get, it comes in a bundle, and you get this silicone mat here. And that's quite good for holding ink pads quite still as well. And all I'm going to do is get my paper here and run it through the edge. Now, my inks are obviously fairly new, so I'm going to get quite a lot of ink transfer on this, and I don't want it to have a solid straight line all the time. So I'm going on a little bit of an angle to get more of the ink coming through like that. So I'm just going to go through this and do all four sides. Doesn't have to be perfect. I don't mind that I've got extra pieces coming through here. If I want to get more of those, I can just flatten that out even more so that more of this comes through. I didn't want to use my blending brush on this. I wanted to control it a little bit, but you can see I've got that on these two edges here. And then I've got this one as well. So I'm going to try and get that little brush sort of look effect on this side as well. I'm also going to do this same treatment to the pattern pieces as well, just so that they're going to be a little bit more defined on the page. You can use a blending tool for this, the ones with the sponge on the end and the handle. And I'm going to do that for both of these pieces. Sometimes it's really hard to choose which side of the pattern paper you want to show because they're both so gorgeous. But I wanted to try this patina look here. I'm just going to put a little bit more on that edge and a bit more here as well. So that's why it's good just to refer back with a white piece underneath, because you can pick up where you've got enough of this ink or if you want to add a little bit more to it. So now I need to do that also for this background piece here so everything matches. What I'm doing with this piece, because it's already being gutted out, I can hold the inside piece so that I've got a little bit more control of it rather than trying to hold it at the edges here. But you can see I've got all of that gorgeous crumb cake colour going around the outside of here. You could do this before you gut the middle, but it's just as easy to do it after you have cut out the middle section just by holding it from the inside. So I'm just going to put all this stuff away, and then we're going to start laying out our page. I've got this piece here And I've decided that I really don't want that much of a look on this, so I'm going to re-ink this piece later. I'm just going to turn this over and re-ink around the edges. Some of it's already come through. And what I referred to before, this is a fairly new pad, so it's quite juicy, so you'll get more ink transfer if you've just re-inked or if you've got a brand new pad. And then for the right side, I'm going to have a strip coming down like this. So I'm going to be able to cut away some of this and use it on another project. And when I cut that away, I'm not going to re-ink that edge. So I've just cut 2.5 inches off here, and I'll be able to lay that over, and then I'm going to have photos along here so nobody will actually notice, and you can't even really notice with it directly on top of here anyway, because of the texture and the pattern in this paper. It doesn't really pick up that there's a seam here at all, I don't think. So I've got all my pieces laid out here for my pattern paper and the white cardstock that I've used. I'm just going to lift this up here because really you can't see that seam very well at all, so I don't necessarily have to cover that with a photo holder, even though I have planned to. Now I have decided on a colour for my photo mats here out of the neutral cardstock. So Stampin' Up! Currently have 12 by 12 cardstock available in colour families. So this is the neutral pack. For those of you that are used to using close to my heart papers, these aren't double-sided. They're the same colour on both sides, and they're a heavier weight than what we have previously been used to, but I am in love with this colour range. I've used 1 sheet of pattern paper to do this layout. I'm going to use 1 sheet of crumb cake for my photo mats. And I did play around with this a little bit beforehand. I've decided I want 1 single hero photo on this side. So this is my 5 by 7 photo. And then I've got a 4 by 6 over on this side. And I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to bring that up to here where this join is. I can actually just go over it a little bit. I'm thinking I'm going to do a cluster of all those embossed and die cut pieces and stamp pieces on this side. And then I'm going to do some 3 by 4 photos across the top here. I know that when I go down to the beach, and this is going to be a beach themed page, I do take a lot of portrait and landscape style photos. So when I do that, I make sure that when I'm doing some pages that don't have photos on there, I've got both orientations. I can always change things around and bring in 2 4 by 6 photos in a portrait orientation if I want to. Know that I'm going to have a title up here. So before I bring in all of my stamped images to dress all of this up, I'm going to put my title here. Actually, what I might do is bring in some of these pieces. So you can see these have been inked up, and I know that I'm going to have the same sort of formation for clusters of these across the 2 pages. So I'm going to have 2 sand dollars, and then I think I'm going to have a coral piece like this. And I'm going to have a large starfish and then 2 of the smaller ones. Now you can see I didn't waste anywhere. I stamped off the edge of an embossing folder. I'm actually going to bring that in and place that, I think, around here. This could change, but just to give you an idea of the grouping. And then I can have some tucked in behind the coral and some going over the top of the coral, and the same with the sand dollars here. So that's the sort of cluster I think I'm going to go for, but I want to get my title prepped because I'm going to do some stamping for that. And in this set, there's quite a few images here that you can use for background pieces. I've chosen the little dots here, but there's also these gorgeous rocks or pebbles. If you live in a rural area where they've built walls out of stones that are found on the ground, this would be a perfect stamp set to use for that. But I'm just going to use this little spray piece here, and I know that I'm going to put some of it around the edges of where my clusters are going to go, and it's also going to be where my title is going to sit. So I'm just going to move this one out of the way for now. And I did go ahead and have a little bit of a practice with what colors I want to do. So I've stamped some with Coastal Cabana and some with Crumb Cake, and then put a different stamp letter on top, and I'm using classic letters from Stampin' Up! Now, this is a more formal look than what you normally think of with a beach life type layout, but having the splatter behind it, I think works really well. So I'm interested to know what your favorite color combination is for this. Is it the tone on tone with the 2 colors matching here, or is it the reverse with having Coastal Cabana splatters on the background and Crumb Cake on the top, or switch that around with Coastal Cabana as the letter and the Crumb Cake as the base? Because this this is quite heavy in the brown tones here, and there's a little bit of Coastal Cabana here. I think I'm going to stamp my letters in that color and have the sandy look or the crumb cake as the background. And I'm going to stamp some of this around this area for my title to live on. So I'm just going to move these aside and draw around the edges here so that I know I want to do my splatters coming up from here to put my title. So I just need to open up my crumb cake here. I don't need a spongy surface for this at all. I'm just going to come in so that I stamp up a whole area radiating up from where my photo is. I want some of them to be lighter than others. So some I'm just doing a gentle little kiss, and others I am pressing a little bit more firmly. But this is going to be where my title is going to go. So I'm just going to keep going along with this. You can see I am just touching off on this. I don't have to ink this up with a lot of pressure. And this is a new stamp pad, so it really doesn't need a lot of pressure. Now, while I was talking, I wasn't rotating my stamp very much. I don't want it to all look exactly the same as it goes up from my photo, but I can come back in and fill in certain areas. And I'm continuing on here because I've got this cluster that's going to go around this side. So what I'm going to do is go off the edge. Actually, I could do some second generation while I'm doing this as well. That actually looks quite good. I wish I'd done it behind my title. So that looks pretty good. I think I might need to add just a little bit more up here. I'm also going to build a cluster down in this section. So while I've got my stamp inked up, so while I've got everything out, I'm going to do that as well. And that might do for this one right now. Actually, I'm going to extend this just a little bit out here to make it look a little bit more organic. And I'm also going to bring in my right page because I'm going to have a cluster coming out of this section as well. I've added in some additional stamping to go further down on the left side because my title is going to be Beach Life and these letters are quite large, so it didn't fit across here like I wanted to. So I'm going to do my title up the side and across, so that's why I've extended this down here. And that also helps hide that little smudge that I did. So I'm just going to turn my page sideways and bring in Coastal Cabana. And my title is going to run, I'll just turn this back again so you can see. My title is going to run Beach Life. I want to extend beach up to here so that then life comes across here. So I need to put the L onto a block first. Just going to take this one off. I've got all my letters out here that I need to use, so they're ready to go. And by stamping my L first, I'll know where to start my letter that's running down this way. So I'm just going to bring in my scratch piece of paper here just to make sure that this is all inking up how I want it to. And it looks gorgeous. And I will need to get over the top of my layout, so I'm going to edit that part out because my head will go over top. So I've got my L here, and then I'm going to rotate this around. I've got some ink all over this. So I just need to wipe that bit off. I don't want it to transfer onto my project. Normally I put my stamp at the top part of the block if the block's a little bit larger, so that I'm just inking up that section. Okay, so here we go. My H for beach is going to line up where the top of the L is, and this is one of the reasons why I've already adhered my photo mat down here, because that will help me line up all my letters running down this way. And I don't mind that it's a little bit textured and hasn't stamped absolutely perfectly, because that is going to help with the textured look on this layout. So then I just need to fill in the rest of the letters so that I can complete my title. One thing I wanted to point out with doing a title like this and staggering the letters is that you can actually bring them in a little bit closer to each other, which I love the look of because it gives more continuity to it rather than having it all spread out. Because you can stack the F in a little bit closer to the I so that they overlap just slightly. And the same here, the B can nestle in to this E here rather than having them all laid out like this. And it means your title won't be quite as wide. But I do love doing titles around the corner of a photo. So I've adhered my photo mats down on this side, and now comes the fun part of doing all the clusters. Now I did bring these ones in before for the top right area of this. So I'm just going to play around with this and tuck some underneath the photo mats. And I want everything to be connected here. So I've started with the sand dollars. Normally I start with the largest one, but I want that heavier weight one to be at the bottom here. I think it's actually the mid size. So yes, I've got the mid size and the smaller size up in this top right area. And I'm going to put my coral over top of those and bring in this starfish here. And as I showed you before, this one is going to tuck underneath here so that it doesn't look like I've cut that little bit of his arm off. And then this one, I'm going to nestle up in this area here behind the coral. And then I've got a cluster for this side as well. So whatever I do in one cluster, I'm doing in another usually. So I have 2 sand dollars here. So the largest one, I'm going to tuck under this area here. And if I think I need to do more of this stamping, I can. And then I'm going to put another one so that it partially comes up over the photo. Now, when I build a page where the photos aren't already on there, I don't put adhesive under this section, so I'm able to tuck my photo under at a later point in time. But I'm also doing it in areas where usually when I take a photo of this size, I'm not going to be cutting anything off that's in the actual image. Put one down here. I'm going to extend this one along a little bit. I've got another one here that's a little bit of a blunt edge. I'm going to hide that underneath this piece of coral, I think. Maybe I'll have all of my starfish. And I'm just trying to decide if I want to put another piece of coral here. I might trim that off a little bit so I can tuck it under a bit more. And the reason why I'm considering that is because there is effectively white space between this sand dollar and the beach here. So if I trim a little bit of that off, I'll just bring in my scissors because I have adhered things a little bit closer there. And that just brings the title in and gives it a landing point here rather than it floating with a gap in between this sand dollar and the title. And then I need to work on this side. Now I'm only going to put one cluster on here because it's a little bit more photo heavy. So I'm going to put one down in this area, and that gives you the triangle placement, which makes your eye travel across the page. I've got all of my seashells and starfish and pieces of coral all adhered down. I'm just going to bring this up so that you can see. I did bring in some dimensionals, which is foam tape, and I've popped up some of the sand dollars here, and then I've also popped up some of the legs of the starfish. Now these ones have the foam strips on here, but I haven't peeled the backing off them so that I'm able to tuck my photos in still. So I wanted to show you this product from Stampin' Up. It's foam adhesive strips, and you can see if I bend this back like this, they are very narrow. So you no longer have to cut foam tape in half to get narrow strips, and they fit underneath here perfectly so that you don't have to trim anything else down. So now I'm going to bring in some dots, and these are adhesive back sparkle gems. So I'm thinking some of the gold will work well. So I'm just going to dot those around using some small ones and some large ones, just 3 in each cluster, and some I'm able to partially tuck under elements like so, and that makes everything come together. Now this is a bigger cluster than the other one, so I might just add 2 more. I do like doing this with odd numbers. I'm just going to tuck another larger one here and a smaller one here, and then just some more on this side as well. So that's my page basically done. I will draw some journal lines here. The last thing I'm going to add to this page is a sentiment from the Seaside Wishes. Now, as most of you know, Stampin' Up have primarily been a card making company, but that is changing. They're going to be embracing the scrapbooking world. But some of these sentiments that go on cards will work quite well on a scrapbook layout. So I think sometimes the simplest things mean the most. And I've stamped this in the crumb cake, and I've cut this from a die I used just the other day. This one here, that works quite well as a tag, and it's from the Greetings of the Season dies. So I'm going to attach that to my layout, and I'm going to use some linen twine. I got this out of one of the card making kits, and I showed this the other day as well. But in case you haven't seen that video, I know that I've got quite a few people that are new to my channel. I bring out my crochet hook. If it's quite a small one, and it fits through this hole extremely well, and it saves me fussing with all these little pieces. So now I've got my tag, and I'm just trying to decide where I'm going to put this because I think this is perfect for this page. I might actually tuck it underneath here. And this is going to have the place and the date of these particular photos, and then I'll do my journaling over on this side. And now I'm going to bring in the other layouts, and I also have cards to show you using this set and also the changing leaves. I'm going to bring in the layout that I created using the Changing Leaves set. So this is another hybrid heart bundle that you can get that will do the die cutting and the embossing at the same time. And you can see I've used exactly the same layout formula to create this double page spread. On the edges of all the white pieces and also on the pattern pieces here, this is another Country Woods pattern paper. I have used espresso ink to ink distress the edges. And for the leaves themselves, I've used crumb cake on the stems and a little bit into the leaves with the blending brush, and then also Old Olive. There are actually 3 leaves that cut with this one. I'll just show you what this one looks like. This is the embossing folder. You can buy this on its own and it's just absolutely beautiful just by itself. I'm going to show you some cards at the end of this that just use the embossing folder. This is the stamp set, and I've got another project on the go with the Full of Life 6x6 papers, and I've used this stamp set on that, and it's absolutely stunning. But this is the die that you get within the dies. You can see there are additional things here that come with the die set that are beautiful to use. I've used this little sprig here and the leaves just to tuck in and around some of the leaf clusters that I've got here. This die works exactly the same as the Seaside Wishes. It clicks into place. You put your paper on here, close up your folder and run this through your embossing machine on a 3D platform setting or the 3D dial on the CTMH machine. And it just gives the most beautiful texture. I'm going to hold this up so hopefully it will pick up on all the gorgeous texture with this. I die cut all of the large sprigs here that have the embossing treatment on them. I die cut them with white cardstock and then color them up with the inks, as I stated earlier. Just layering them and putting them together like this. I chose these colors because it was more representative of leaves here in Australia. I didn't use the maple leaf. You can see that here. We do have oak trees and things like that here in Australia, but for this layout, I wanted to keep it with these 2 styles of leaves to represent more of a eucalyptus type tree. And I absolutely love this whole concept. I know it's been around for a little while, but I love that Stampin' Up have done this with hybrid embossing folders. There are a couple of others. I'm going to bring another one in and show you what it does with the cards that I've created. And I actually have another layout to show you and a little bit of a trick to use a stamp with an embossing folder to extend the use of your embossing folder and to give you a different look in a stamped image. I'm just going to hold one of these up to the camera here, just in the white. So you can see this is what I started with, and just like with the Seaside Wishes and the Sand Dollars, I did some blending and it really picked up on the embossed raised elements of this, but these are so elegant just in white themselves, and I will bring in some cards to show you where I have used that, but I'm going to just show you all the layouts that I've done first. So I'll just take this one away, and I'm bringing in the layout that I've used with translucent florals, and I was thinking that I would be able to stamp the floral and the leaf elements here and then run them through an embossing machine, but when I did that you couldn't really see the texture, so I wanted to explore this a little bit further with an embossing folder, and I'm going to show you the technique that I used. I'll just spread the layout out here. I've used that same little splatter stamp from Seaside Wishes to put it around all of the clusters here. I've used Gorgeous Grape, Blueberry Bushel and Pretty Peacock with my stamping. It's Pretty Peacock mats, and the inking that I've done on all the edges of the pattern paper and the white here is with Pretty Peacock. And I absolutely love how this has turned out. I don't normally do a lot of florals, and I didn't want to put more than 3 colors on the page. I think the 3 colors work quite well together, and I'm just going to bring in the die that I did this Celebrate with. You can see there's a little bit of height to this, and behind the white here I've stacked up, I think it's 3 or 4 of the outline piece cut with Pretty Peacock. And that is from Wanted to Say dies. I've been growing my collection of Stampin' Up products. This is a die set that is intended for cards, but it's quite flexible and you can use it on scrapbooking pages because you have the Celebrate here. It's beautifully fine, and then the bubble outline that you've got, and then the birthday could be used as well because the outline here, you could trim that down if you didn't want to put Happy Birthday on a page. It also has Feel Better Soon and You're Too Kind. And what I love about these is that they have an outline to them, and it looks absolutely gorgeous on a page. So I'm going to show you how I got this texture on the leaves. I've only done this treatment to the leaves themselves, so I'm just going to put this off to the side. I think you can see here that there is an additional element to what the stamp image is. So I'm just going to get Pretty Peacock out, ready to use. just going to take my mat away. I'm bringing in my glass mat. I apologize if there's a little bit of glare here, but it works really well with a glass mat. And you can see I've got some here that I have stamped, and I wanted to show you the stamping technique that I have found that works best with Stampin' Up! Inks. So the first one I'm going to stamp for you is just the floral. Now, I haven't done any additional treatment to this. Might move my page out of the way. Now, close to my heart ink pads, we used to do pretty much CPR to ink things up. We would stamp and we would press it around like this before we would actually stamp the ink off. But with Stampin' Up! Inks, they are quite a juicy ink pad, and mine are quite new, so I really don't need to apply too much ink to the stamp itself. And because this is a cling stamp or a red rubber stamp, I definitely don't need to apply too much pressure. So I can just pick this up after it's been resting there and stamp that, and it didn't work. So let me just try that again. I'm just going to rest this here for a little bit while I talk, and then I'm just going to pick it up. I have been using this one a bit. So this was one that I did with that technique, and it worked beautifully. But I've hardly touched this to the ink pad at all. And instead of just casually putting my block down, I'm actually going to apply a little bit of pressure so that I get the proper outline here. And you can see how beautifully that stamps up. With hardly any pressure at all, I can leave my stamp on there if I want a little bit of a lighter impression, but just a gentle kiss and you will get a beautiful stamped image. And this one is particularly lovely because it does all the light and shade for you. So I can stamp this off again and get an even more delicate outline to it. Now I'm using the sample that I did in a demonstration. I'm just going to clean this one off and then I'll do the leaves here. I just want to put this one away. I'm going to bring in my pretty Peacock and also this embossing folder. Now, this one is from the Basics 3D embossing folders. I've used this a couple of times. This one has a star sort of finish to it, which would be great, as I've said before, for beach pages, celebration pages, Christmas pages. This one has a circle dot and this one has lines on it. So it gives sort of like a burlap effect. And I used this on the die cuts of these and it really didn't work out very well. So what I'm going to show you on camera is I'm just going to ink this up and stamp it down so that you can see what the image looks like. And that is absolutely beautiful. The glass mat, I highly recommend a glass mat for stamping. I know the Versamat is fairly solid, but the glass mat just seems to work really well, especially with these cling stamps. Now, here is a piece that I've run through this embossing folder. I've decided to show you this with one that I have used so that you can see the ink here and the design. It's a beautiful design, but to get this lined effect, it's quite simple really. You use this as like a little stamping off platform. So I can remove some of the ink and then I'm going to stamp this down. And you still need to let the ink absorb into the paper. What I did here was I rushed it too much. And you can see that not only have I got these beautiful light and shade areas of this stamped image, but I've added another texture to the stamped image by using this piece of embossed paper here from this burlap type embossing folder. And I just love how that looks. I can show you how it looks with a floral. But I decided to leave the florals on my layouts just like they are here. But I'll just use the same ink color here. I've stamped off. And now I'm leaving that soak in and you get that feature here as well. Any stamp image that has a bit of surface area, you can use with an embossing folder. I think this would be lovely with a large alphabet stamp. If you've got one that's fairly chunky or bold, you can get some really great texture to those by using this technique. So I had a lot of fun playing with that, and even though I was going to try and present something that was using the embossing folders onto a stamped image to give the same hybrid hype type feel, I had to adapt it a little bit, but I'm really happy with how this has come out. I think it's a really cool technique. So let me just reset everything here, and then I'm going to bring in all the cards that I have created with the 3 collections I've just shown you. The first cards I'm going to show you are using the Seaside Wishes. I've used the Stampin' Up 4x3 inch and 6x4 inch cards. So these are the Memories and More cards and envelopes, but they actually measure a little bit bigger. So you can see it's 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. And what that's really good for is you can cut a 6x4 panel and still have a border around the edge. And likewise, you can cut a 3x4 panel and still have a border around the edge. So these actually measure 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. So they're a little bit larger than what's noted on the website. This one I have stamped with that little splatter. The 6x4 piece, I've dragged the edges through the crumb cake, and then I've layered up the pieces of coral that are die cut with some of the stamped starfish elements. And you can see these little starfish here I have stamped onto the embossed piece as I showed you on the page layout. The sentiment here is from the Seaside Wishes, and I've used this tag here from the Greetings of the Season dies. So that's coming very handy for here, and then some linen thread to finish it off. I absolutely love this card. I was going to do more color on here, but I really love the look of this with just the crumb cake and the white. I think it's very stylish and very classic. On the inside, I've just stamped some of those little starfish, and that finishes off the inside panel. And then on the envelope, I've got a starfish on the front and just a little row of those on the flap of the envelope, just to make the envelope a bit fancy and cute too. I think it's always lovely to have an envelope that's been dressed up and some attention paid to the inside of a card. The little 3x4 note card, I have used just the embossing folder here without the die cuts, and I've positioned my 3x4 piece so that I would get some of the sand dollars and this lovely texture on here as well. The sentiment here is from Seaside Wishes, as is the little tag here, this oval, and that fits beautifully on that size note card. And I've got the linen thread. On the inside, I've just got one little starfish, and then I decided to see what would happen if I just ran an envelope through the embossing folder, and I think it's absolutely gorgeous to have an embossed envelope, and I think that worked really well. So I've done that several times for this size note card. I'm going to put the cards up here because I kept the same layout design for the scrapbook layouts, and I've done a similar thing with the cards as well. Let me just put them over this side so I can work this way. I'm going to bring in the cards that I've created using the Changing Leaves embossing folder and the die cuts. I haven't done any stamping on these, and what I've done is utilized some of the off-cut pieces here. So when this is run through the die cutting machine, this is what is left. And for this one here, rather than throwing away all these pieces, I fussy cut those out and then I place them over the front of the note card. Sort of like random stamping, but it's random fussy cut pieces. I use the same inks on the leaves, crumb cake, and then old olive. And this sentiment here is cut with the textured metallic specialty papers. You can see there's a little bit of texture on there, and that's with another one of the Hybrid Hype folders. So I'll just bring that in to show you. It's called Thoughtful Moments, and you get all of these sentiments, and it's the same system as what you do with all the other Hybrid Hype ones. You can run this through as just an embossing folder, or you can click it into place and run it through with a whole sheet on here if you wanted to get all of the sentiments in one piece, or you can just cut a little piece of paper here to fit the one that you want and run that through. So this little Just Because, I just had 1-inch pieces of this textured metallic paper and cut these out to go very simply across the base of this leaf element, and then I've popped that up with some foam strips. I have embossed the envelope for this as well, and I love the texture on that. I need to move some of these things away so I can keep showing you what I've created. I know I'm showing you a lot of product, but I did this for a special presentation for some Australian consultants, and I was really excited about what I presented, and I wanted to show you all what I've done with this hybrid type embossing folders because it's something that is new to us close to my heart consultants. This one here, the panel is just run through with the embossing folder with a leaf simply blended and put on top, and that Just Because sentiment again. This could be a birthday card, it could be a thank you card, and it could be I'm thinking of you card. So it's quite generic with this type of sentiment on there, and I can use it when I need to. And I have run this through with the embossing folder through my die cutting machine this way, just to emboss the inside edge of the card, which I think is a really lovely touch. And I have embossed just the back flap of the envelope here the same way, just putting it with my embossing folder over top here and running through so that nothing was covering this part of the envelope. And because I used these leaves here on my scrapbook layout, I had a lot of these maple style leaves left over and I didn't want them to go to waste. I think I ran this through about 5 times for the layout, so I had quite a few of them. So what I did was the same sort of concept that I did with this one here, and I only used this style of leaf on here and put those in the background, adhered them straight to the note card and trimmed off the edges, popped up one of the leaves that I have blended with the old olive and crumb cake, and then that same sentiment. I haven't got anything on the inside of these note cards, but I do have an embossed folder for each of those, and I just wanted to show you what that Celebrate looks like simply done with that textured metallic paper. It's absolutely beautiful. You can do these sentiments with just plain white. It still stands out beautifully. So this one is a hello. It doesn't stand out quite as much the darker the color of the paper is. So I ran one of these through with the Pretty Peacock and the distinction wasn't that great. But you can ink these up by swiping your ink pad over the embossing folder and running it through, and you will get ink just on the raised section if you use a light hand. So I have one more set of cards to show you using the translucent florals. I wonder if you're all hanging in there. This is a bit of a longer video than normal, but I was very excited about all this and wanted to show you all the things. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is that with the Thoughtful Moments set, you also get these cute little dies here that you can cut several flowers, stars, leaves, or little rainbows and hearts out of as well. And these I think are like little butterflies. So you could cut that out and then draw a little butterfly body on there with the antenna. So that's quite cute to dress up some cards as well. These are the ones that I did with the translucent florals. So you can see they're all very similar type layouts. This one has a cluster of elements. The changing leaves image here was large enough to have just that on its own. This one here, I've used 3 of these leaves to create a bunch of leaves here. And you can see I use that stamping technique by stamping onto an embossed piece first and then stamping off onto a plain sheet of white and then die cutting them. And there's the hello from that Thoughtful Moments. And I have stacked 3 sheets of Pretty Peacock behind that, stacked them up on top of themselves and done them as a little bit of a drop shadow. The envelope itself has a leaf on the front, and on the inside of the card I've done that same leaf to continue adding just the final little details to those elements. And this is another very simple one with just the embossed piece here. They're both inked with the Pretty Peacock. This time I've just cut one in Pretty Peacock and I've put some foam strip behind there with the silver foil cardstock for the sentiments used on both of those. I've got a little stamped image there and a stamped image. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing what I've created with the hybrid hype embossing folders and a little bit of a twist with a stamp and a 3D embossing folder to get some added texture. I'm just bringing them all back in so you can just have one final look at them and see that yes, they are all the same formula, and the pattern papers for all of these are the Country Woods Designer Series papers, and they're absolutely beautiful. As always, I will have links to everything that I've used in the description below. Thank you so much for hanging in there until the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed what I've created with these, and if you're new to the hybrid hype or the hybrid style embossing folders that cut at the same time, I hope you enjoy playing with them as much as I have when I've created these projects. Thank you all so much for watching. Oh, I haven't stamped my title, Beach Life, across the top with this one because I gave that sample page away that I showed at the beginning of the layout. So I need to do that so I've got it for myself. Thank you everybody for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.